In the golden age of professional wrestling, a time when heroes were larger than life and villains were hated with real passion, two men stood on opposite ends of that divide. Jim, Hacksaw, Duggan, the flag-waving all-American hero, and the Iron Sheik, the sneering Iranian villain who represented everything the crowd loved to hate. But in 1987, reality shattered the illusion. A single police stop on a New Jersey highway exposed a secret the wrestling world wasn't ready to face: that heroes and villains, sworn enemies on-screen, could be friends behind the curtain. This is the untold story of Jim Duggan and the Iron Sheik's wild kayfabe arrest incident, the moment that cracked open the world of professional wrestling and changed it forever. The mid-1980s were a magical time for wrestling fans. The World Wrestling Federation, now WWE, was exploding in popularity. Hulk Hogan was the face of a new American phenomenon, while Vince McMahon was transforming wrestling from local territory shows into a national spectacle. Jim Duggan was one of the WWF's rising stars. With his trademark 2x4, blue trunks, and loud, "Who?" battle cry, he embodied the everyman hero: tough, loyal, patriotic. The Iron Sheik was the perfect foil. A former amateur wrestling champion from Iran, he played the part of the foreign villain with unmatched intensity. Draped in the Iranian flag, spitting venom about America, and shouting, "Iran #1." He was the embodiment of everything the crowd wanted to boo. In wrestling terms, Duggan was the babyface, the good guy. The Sheik was the heel, the bad guy. And back then, those lines weren't supposed to blur. Not ever. To understand the chaos that followed, you have to understand one word: kayfabe. Kayfabe was the unwritten code that ruled wrestling for decades. It meant that wrestlers had to stay in character, on and off camera. If you were a hero, you acted like one in public. If you were a villain, you didn't shake hands with fans or appear friendly with your enemies. In the 1980s, the industry depended on that illusion. Fans believed what they saw on TV. Wrestlers lived their gimmicks 24/7. Even Vince McMahon insisted that rivals should travel separately, eat separately, and never be seen together outside the ring. So when Jim Duggan and the Iron Sheik got into a car together one May afternoon in 1987, they were already breaking wrestling's sacred rule. It was May 26, 1987. The WWF was touring New Jersey, and Duggan and Sheik were scheduled to wrestle that night in Asbury Park. They decided to share a ride to the venue, a simple choice that would become one of wrestling's most infamous stories. As Duggan drove along the Garden State Parkway, a New Jersey state trooper noticed something suspicious. The car was swerving slightly. When the officer pulled them over, what he found would make national headlines. Inside the car, police discovered a small amount of marijuana, cocaine, and alcohol. Jim Duggan, the American hero, was found drinking a beer behind the wheel. The Iron Sheik, his sworn enemy on television, was carrying cocaine. Both men were arrested, but the real shock wasn't the drugs, it was the fact that they were together. News spread fast. Within hours, local papers were reporting that WWF wrestlers Jim Duggan and the Iron Sheik had been arrested together. To casual readers, it was just another celebrity arrest. But to wrestling fans, it was earth-shattering. The all-American good guy and the Iranian villain were supposed to hate each other. Their feud was one of the WWF's most heated storylines. They were scheduled to fight that very night. Now, the illusion was shattered. Fans realized that wrestling wasn't what it seemed, that maybe, just maybe, the rivalries they loved were scripted. It was one of the first major public exposures of wrestling's biggest secret, that it was entertainment, not sport. The WWF reacted swiftly. Vince McMahon was furious. The arrest didn't just break kayfabe, it threatened the credibility of the entire company. The Iron Sheik was immediately fired. Jim Duggan was temporarily suspended. For Sheik, it was a devastating blow. Once a main event performer who had even held the WWF World Heavyweight Championship, his career never fully recovered. For Duggan, the punishment was lighter. His clean-cut image and genuine remorse helped him return after a brief suspension. But the stigma of that arrest followed him for years. Vince McMahon, already walking a fine line between real sport and scripted entertainment, tightened control over his roster. From that point forward, he made sure everyone understood: if you broke kayfabe in public, you risked your career. Ironically, the scandal that almost destroyed their careers ended up marking a turning point for the entire industry. By the early 1990s, the WWF began to slowly admit what many already suspected, that wrestling was scripted entertainment. The era of strict kayfabe started to fade. In a way, the Duggan Sheik incident opened that door. It forced fans, promoters, and wrestlers to confront reality. For the first time, the public saw the blurred line between performance and personality. The heroes weren't saints, and the villains weren't monsters. They were all performers, flawed, human, and fascinating. Years later, both men spoke about that day with a mix of regret and humor. Jim Duggan, in interviews, admitted it was a huge mistake, not just because of the law, but because it betrayed the fans' trust. He said it taught him to take the business more seriously and to respect the responsibility that came with being a public figure. The Iron Sheik, meanwhile, turned the story into part of his wild legend. Known for his outrageous personality and unfiltered honesty, he often joked about the incident, calling it one of the craziest days of his life. In the decades that followed, both men rebuilt their reputations in different ways. Duggan became a beloved veteran and Hall of Famer, while Sheik transformed into a cult icon, his social media presence and interviews turning him into an internet legend. Their shared mistake had become a bizarre bond, a moment frozen in wrestling folklore. After the 1987 arrest, the word kayfabe began to lose its power. The wrestling world changed, fans grew smarter, the internet brought transparency, and the line between real and scripted blurred beyond repair. Today, wrestlers openly discuss their characters, creative decisions, and storylines. Documentaries, podcasts, and social media have peeled back the curtain entirely. But every time fans talk about the old days, the Duggan Sheik incident comes up. It's remembered as the moment when the wall cracked, when the world realized that wrestling's greatest secret couldn't stay hidden forever. Historians now view the 1987 arrest as one of the most pivotal off-screen moments in wrestling history. It didn't involve a title match, a pay-per-view, or a grand promo. Yet it revealed more about the business than any scripted storyline ever could. The Sheik-Duggan scandal symbolized the end of wrestling's innocence, the moment when the fantasy met the real world head-on. In many ways, it paved the way for what wrestling would become in the 1990s and beyond, a self-aware, entertainment-driven spectacle that acknowledged its own artifice. Beyond the headlines, though, it's also a deeply human story. Two men, each playing their part in the grand theater of wrestling, made a mistake, a moment of poor judgment that exposed the fragile balance between performance and reality. Duggan later said that he and Sheik actually respected each other deeply. Behind the supposed rivalry was friendship, one built on the shared struggle of life on the road, endless travel, and the pressure of keeping up appearances. Their story reminds us that even in the world of scripted violence and exaggerated personas, the people behind the characters are real, with flaws, friendships, and fears like anyone else. When that New Jersey police car's lights flashed red and blue in 1987, neither Jim Duggan nor the Iron Sheik could have imagined what was about to happen. That single moment, that one arrest, became a symbol of wrestling's transformation. It exposed the truth, shattered illusions, and began the slow death of kayfabe. Yet it also made wrestling stronger. Because from that day on, fans didn't just watch the characters, they started to appreciate the performers behind them. Today, decades later, the story of Jim Duggan and the Iron Sheik's wild kayfabe arrest incident stands as a legendary reminder. In professional wrestling, the line between fiction and reality is always razor thin, and sometimes, when the curtain slips, that's where the most unforgettable stories are born.